Lyric's hand froze on the crystal glass she was polishing when she saw it. The scar, that jagged line running from his left shoulder blade down to his ribs, partially visible through his unbuttoned shirt as he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. Her breath caught in her throat, and the glass slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Roman DeLuca turned slowly, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Problem? His voice was velvet wrapped around steel, the kind of voice that made grown men confess their sins. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because that scar, she knew that scar. She had touched it once, 15 years ago, in the darkness of a warehouse fire. She had dragged a bleeding teenager out of the flames, never knowing his name, never seeing his face clearly through the smoke. But that scar, shaped like lightning, had been burned into her memory forever. And now the boy she had saved was standing in front of her as the most feared Mafia boss in New York City. I'm sorry, Mr. DeLuca, she managed, dropping to her knees to collect the broken glass, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pieces. He moved toward her with predatory grace, and she felt the heat of his presence before she saw his polished Italian shoes enter her field of vision. Look at me. When her eyes met his, something flickered in his expression. Recognition, confusion, something dangerous and unnameable. Do I know you? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun, and Lyric realized with terrifying clarity that her secret was about to unravel everything. If you want to discover how this story began and what happened after this moment of recognition, subscribe to the channel and leave in the comments where you're watching from. Each view helps bring more stories like this one. 3 weeks earlier, Lyric Bennett had stood outside the chrome and glass tower in Manhattan's financial district, clutching her worn leather bag and trying to convince herself she belonged there. She didn't. Not with her thrift store dress and scuffed shoes, not with the exhaustion etched into her dark skin from working 2 jobs just to keep her head above water. But the cleaning company had been desperate, and she had been more desperate. So here she was, about to clean the penthouse office of Roman DeLuca, a name whispered in fear across the 5 boroughs. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like ascending into another world. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that screamed power and money. Black marble floors, contemporary art that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, and windows that offered a god's-eye view of the city. "You're the new maid?" A woman in a severe black suit looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Mr. DeLuca is particular about his space. Don't touch anything on his desk. Don't move any papers. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, be invisible." Lyric nodded, swallowing the humiliation that came with being reminded of her place. She'd felt this way her entire life. Invisible, insignificant, easily replaced. The first week passed without incident. She arrived at 6 a.m. before Roman came in, and left by 7 a.m. She saw glimpses of him only through security footage the building manager sometimes had playing. A tall, devastatingly handsome man in tailored suits, always surrounded by men who looked like they could break bones with a smile. But on the 8th day, everything changed. She was polishing the bookshelves in his private study when she heard voices approaching. Male voices, angry and tense. She froze, looking around desperately for an exit, but there was none. The voices grew louder. "Don't care what Salvatore thinks," Roman's voice cut through the air like a blade. "He crossed a line. He touched one of our shipments. That means war. Boss, if we move against him now..." I said I don't care. The door opened, and Lyric found herself face to face with Roman DeLuca for the first time. He was even more striking in person, 6'3" of lean muscle and dangerous elegance, with black hair styled perfectly, a sharp jawline covered in precisely trimmed stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light. A tattoo peeked from beneath his collar, some intricate design she couldn't quite make out, but it was the way he looked at her that made her heart stop. Not with anger or annoyance, but with a curiosity that felt almost predatory. "Who are you?" he asked, his Italian accent barely noticeable beneath his perfect English. I'm Lyric, the new maid. I'm sorry, I didn't know you'd be here so early. She moved toward the door, but his hand shot out, not touching her but blocking her path. "Lyric," he repeated as if tasting the word. "Unusual name." "My mother liked music," she said quietly, keeping her eyes down the way she'd been taught to do around powerful men. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you. Her eyes snapped up, meeting his, and something electric passed between them. His expression shifted just for a moment, as if he'd been struck by something he couldn't name. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 8 days, Mr. DeLuca. "Roman," he corrected, and the other man in the room, a massive bodyguard, looked shocked. "Call me Roman." "That wouldn't be appropriate, sir." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, I suppose it wouldn't." He studied her for another long moment, and Lyric felt like he was reading every secret written on her soul. "Carry on, then." He moved past her, and she caught his scent. Expensive cologne, leather, and something uniquely him that made her dizzy. As she tried to focus on her work, her hands trembling, she couldn't help but steal glances at him. He was on the phone now, speaking in rapid Italian, pacing like a caged panther. And then he shrugged off his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and began unbuttoning his shirt. Lyric quickly averted her eyes, heat flooding her cheeks. She shouldn't be here. This was too intimate, too dangerous. But then she heard him hiss in pain, and she looked up instinctively. He was pressing his hand to his ribs, his face tight with discomfort. "Are you okay?" The words escaped before she could stop them. He looked at her, surprised. "Old injury. Acts up sometimes." "You should put ice on it," she said, then immediately regretted speaking out of turn. But Roman just watched her with that unnerving intensity. "You know about injuries? I used to volunteer at a clinic in my neighborhood. Before—" She trailed off, not wanting to explain how poverty had stolen even that small joy from her. Before what? Before life got in the way. Something in his expression softened, just fractionally. That happens to all of us. They stared at each other across the room, and Lyric felt the world tilt on its axis. This man, this dangerous, powerful man, was looking at her like she was visible, like she mattered. The moment shattered when his phone rang. "We're not done," he said, and she wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the person on the other end of the line, but the way his eyes held hers for one more second made her think, maybe, impossibly, he meant her. Over the next 2 weeks, Lyric found herself in Roman's presence more and more. He started arriving earlier, staying later, always seeming to be in whatever room she was cleaning. At first, she thought it was paranoia, but then she caught him watching her, really watching her, with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Tell me about yourself," he said one morning, appearing in the doorway of his study while she was dusting his desk. She jumped, nearly knocking over a photograph of a young boy. "There's nothing to tell, Mr. DeLuca." "Roman," he corrected again, "and I doubt that. Everyone has a story. Mine isn't very interesting. Try me." She hesitated, but something in his eyes made her want to trust him. "I grew up in the Bronx. My mother died when I was 17. I've been working ever since, waitressing, cleaning, whatever pays. That's it. That's my whole life." "What did you want to be?" Before life got in the way. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. "A nurse," she admitted quietly. "I wanted to help people." "Why didn't you?" "College costs money. Money I didn't have." She smiled bitterly. "Not everyone gets to chase their dreams, Mr. Roman." He was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally looked up, his expression was troubled. "No," he said softly. "They don't." That afternoon, Lyric was cleaning the bathroom adjacent to Roman's office when she heard raised voices. An argument. She tried to ignore it, but then she heard a crash and instinct took over. She rushed into the office to find Roman pressed against the wall by a massive man with a gun. "Salvatore sends his regards," the man growled. Time seemed to slow. Lyric saw the gun, saw Roman's calculated expression that showed no fear even staring down death, and something in her snapped. She grabbed the marble paperweight from his desk and swung it with all her strength at the attacker's head. The man crumpled. Roman moved like lightning, disarming him and calling for his guards in sharp Italian. Within seconds, the room was flooded with armed men, hauling the unconscious attacker away. And then Roman turned to her, and the fury in his eyes made her step back. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded, advancing on her. "You could have been killed." "He was going to shoot you," she shot back, her own fear transforming into anger. "That's not your concern. You're a maid, not a—" He stopped abruptly, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Not a what?" she challenged, something reckless taking hold of her. "Not important enough to care about? Not worth risking my life for?" "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I'm just the help. Invisible. Disposable." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I've been invisible my whole life, Mr. DeLuca, but that doesn't mean I'll stand by and watch someone die when I can do something about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Roman stared at her, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his face. Then, slowly, he reached out and cupped her cheek with his hand. "You're not invisible to me," he whispered, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You haven't been, since the moment I saw you." Her breath caught. His touch was gentle, reverent, completely at odds with the violence that had just unfolded. She should pull away. She should remember her place. But God help her. She leaned into his touch instead. "Lyric," he breathed, and the way he said her name, like a prayer, like a promise, made her heart stutter. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. He pulled back, his professional mask sliding back into place, but his eyes remained on her. "Marcus will take you home," he said, his voice rough. "You're done for today, and tomorrow—" He hesitated. "Tomorrow you work directly for me. No more cleaning company. I want you here, safe, where I can—" He stopped himself. "Where you can—" "What?" "Where I can protect you," he finished. But something in his eyes said there was more he wasn't saying. That night, as Marcus drove her back to her cramped apartment in Queens, Lyric touched her cheek where Roman's hand had been and wondered what she was getting herself into. The next morning, she found an envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a contract offering her triple her current salary to work exclusively as Roman's personal assistant and housekeeper. At the bottom, in bold handwriting, was a note. "You saved my life. Let me return the favor. R." She stared at the paper, her hands shaking. This was insane, dangerous, everything she should run from. But when she showed up at his penthouse the next day, contract signed, the smile that broke across Roman's face made her think maybe, just maybe, danger was worth it. Working directly for Roman changed everything. She no longer came and went before dawn. Instead, she arrived at 8 a.m. and often stayed until evening, managing his schedule, organizing his space, and slowly learning the intricacies of his world. It was a world of contradictions. He could be ruthless on phone calls, ordering actions that she suspected weren't legal, his voice cold and commanding. But then he'd turn to her and ask if she'd eaten lunch, his concern genuine and warm. "You need to take better care of yourself," he said one afternoon, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted. When did you last have a full night's sleep?" She hesitated. "I work another job at night." His expression darkened. "Not anymore. Your salary here is more than enough. The money's not—" She stopped herself. "Not for what?" he pressed. "It's nothing. I just have expenses." "What kind of expenses?" His voice had gone soft, dangerous. "Are you in trouble, Lyric? Is someone threatening you?" "No, nothing like that. I just—" She sighed, realizing he wouldn't let it go. "My little brother. He's sick, needs medication. Insurance doesn't cover it all, so—" Roman's entire demeanor shifted. "How old is he?" 15. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, memory, something dark. 15, he repeated quietly. "What's his name?" "David." Roman was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then, "Give me the details. The medication, the doctors, everything." "I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm telling you. By tomorrow, his medical bills will be taken care of." "Roman, I can't accept—" He moved closer, and suddenly she was backed against his desk. His arms braced on either side of her, caging her in. The heat of him, the smell of him, the sheer presence of him made her dizzy. "Yes, you can," he said, his voice low and intense. "Because you saved my life, Lyric. Because you're brave and selfless, and you deserve someone taking care of you for once. Because—" He stopped, his dark eyes searching hers. "Because I want to." "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care what happens to me?" "I don't know," he admitted, and the rawness in his voice made her chest ache. "But I do. From the moment you walked into my life, He shook his head. "I can't explain it." Neither could she. This pull between them, this magnetic force that made her want to touch him, to close the distance, to forget every reason this was impossible. "This is crazy," she breathed. "I know." "You're a—" She couldn't say it. "A criminal," he finished for her. "Yes, I am. And you deserve better." "That's not what I was going to say." "What were you going to say?" "That you're out of my league. That I'm nobody, and you're—" His hand came up, cupping her face again, his thumb brushing her lower lip. "Don't ever call yourself nobody again. Capisci?" She nodded, unable to form words with his hand on her face, his body so close to hers she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Say it," he commanded gently. "Say you understand." "I understand," she whispered. "Good." But he didn't pull away. Instead, his eyes dropped to her lips, and she saw the war raging behind them, desire battling control. "Roman," she breathed, and that was all it took. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was fire and desperation and need. His hands tangled in her hair, and she grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer, drowning in him. She'd never been kissed like this, like she was oxygen, and he was suffocating. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he said roughly. "I know. My world, it's dangerous, Lyric. People will use you to get to me. They'll hurt you. I'm not afraid." "You should be." He pulled back, his expression tortured. "I should send you away, fire you, keep you safe. But you won't." "No," he admitted. "I won't, because I'm a selfish bastard who wants you too much." That evening, Roman insisted on driving her home himself, dismissing his driver. As they pulled up to her building in Queens, she saw him taking in the cracked sidewalks, the graffiti, the obvious poverty. "Let me get you a better place," he said. "This is my home. It's not safe. It's what I can afford. You work for me now. You can afford better. Roman, please." The word sounded foreign on his lips, like he didn't use it often. "Let me do this. For David, if not for you. He needs a clean, safe place to recover." She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some independence, but he was right. David deserved better than their cramped, moldy apartment. "Okay," she whispered, "but nothing extravagant. Just safe." He smiled, victorious, and lifted her hand to his lips. "Anything you want, Tesoro." As she walked into her building, she felt his eyes on her until she disappeared inside. And when she reached her apartment and looked out the window, his black SUV was still there, keeping watch. It was in that moment that Lyric realized she was falling for Roman DeLuca, and terrifyingly she thought he might be falling for her too. 3 days later, Lyric and David moved into a modest but beautiful apartment in a safe neighborhood. Roman had arranged everything, movers, furniture, even stocking the kitchen. David, thin and weak from his illness, had looked around with wide eyes. "Your boss did all this?" he asked skeptically. "He's generous," Lyric said, avoiding her brother's knowing look. "He's into you. David, I'm 15, not blind, and you're into him too." She couldn't deny it. Over the past weeks, she and Roman had grown closer in ways that terrified and thrilled her. Stolen kisses in his office, long conversations late at night about everything and nothing, the way he looked at her like she was precious, rare, something to be protected and cherished. But she'd also seen the darkness in his world. The men who came to his office with blood on their hands, the phone calls in Italian that ended with someone's fate being sealed, the constant danger that followed him like a shadow. "It's complicated," she finally said to David. "Love usually is." That word, love, made her chest constrict. Was that what this was? The answer came 2 weeks later, on the day everything changed. She was in Roman's penthouse office, reorganizing his files, when he came out of his private bathroom, freshly showered after a morning workout. He was wearing only dress pants, his torso bare, and for the first time, she saw the full extent of his tattoos, intricate designs covering his chest and arms. But it was his back that made her freeze. The scar, that lightning-shaped scar running from shoulder blade to ribs. The glass slipped from her hands and shattered. And now here she was on her knees collecting broken pieces, while Roman stood over her asking, "Do I know you?" She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, because she suddenly knew with absolute certainty what the answer was. "No, sir. I'm sorry about the glass." "Lyric." His voice was sharp now. "Look at me." She did, and saw his eyes narrow, his brilliant mind working through something. "That night," he said slowly, 15 years ago, the warehouse fire in Brooklyn. Her face must have given her away because his expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like devastation. "It was you," he breathed. "You pulled me out. You saved me. I didn't know it was you until... Why didn't you say anything?" His voice rose, angry now. "All this time, why didn't you tell me? I didn't remember until I saw the scar. It was dark, there was smoke everywhere, I never saw your face. But you knew." He cut her off, stepping back like she'd struck him. When did you know? Just now. I swear, Roman, I just realized. Don't. He held up a hand, his expression cold and closed off. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. You saved my life 15 years ago and then you just happened to get a job cleaning my office. That's not coincidence, Lyric, that's... He raked his hands through his hair. What do you want? Money? Is that what this has all been about? The accusation hit her like a physical blow. You think that I planned this, that I've been manipulating you. What am I supposed to think? The truth. Tears streamed down her face now. That I had no idea who you were, that the night I pulled you from that fire haunted me for years, because I never knew if you survived, that finding you again, falling for you... She broke off, realizing what she'd just admitted. Roman froze. Falling for me? I didn't mean... Say it again. Roman! Say it. He moved toward her now, his expression intense, desperate. Tell me the truth. All of it. Yes, she whispered. I'm falling for you. Have been since the day you asked me to look at you, since you touched my face, since you kissed me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. But I swear on David's life, I didn't know about the fire until today. He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes, suspicion against hope, fear against desire. Then his phone rang. Not his regular phone, but the red one he kept in his desk drawer, the one that only rang in emergencies. He answered it, listened for 10 seconds and went pale. When? He demanded. Then. How many? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at her with an expression that made her blood run cold. That was my security team at your apartment. Someone tried to break in. David's okay, but what? They were Salvatore's men. He knows about you now, Lyric. He knows you matter to me. The implication hit her like a freight train. David is being brought here. I'm putting guards on him, on you, on everyone you care about. This is my fault, she whispered. If I hadn't hit that man, if I'd just stayed invisible. Roman grabbed her shoulders. Stop. None of this is your fault, it's mine. For bringing you into my world. For being selfish enough to keep you here when I should have... He stopped, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Should have what? Let you go. I don't want to go. You don't have a choice anymore. Not now. Not when every enemy I have will see you as a weakness. He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her forehead. I'm sending you and David somewhere safe. California, maybe. Or Europe. Somewhere far from... No, she pushed against his chest. I'm not running. Lyric, I said no. You don't get to decide my life, Roman, not even to keep me safe. Then what do you suggest? His voice was harsh with fear and frustration. That I just keep you here, paint a target on your back and wait for Salvatore to... He couldn't finish the sentence. You teach me to protect myself. You let me stand beside you instead of hiding me away. You... She took a shaky breath. You trust that I'm strong enough for this. I do trust you, that's not the issue. Then what is? That I can't lose you. The words exploded from him, raw and honest. Not now. Not after 15 years of wondering who saved me, of dreaming about a woman I couldn't remember, and then finding out it was you. You, Lyric. The woman who's made me feel things I thought I was incapable of. The woman who looks at me and sees a man, not a monster. I can't. His voice broke. I can't lose you. She reached up, cupping his face the way he'd done to her so many times. Then don't push me away. We face this together, or not at all. He searched her eyes, and whatever he saw there made something in him surrender. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Together, he whispered into her hair. But you follow my lead. You trust me to keep you safe. I do trust you, even though I'm a criminal, a killer. You're also the man who paid for my brother's medication, who got us a safe home, who looks at me like I'm the most precious thing in the world. She pulled back to look at him. I don't care about your past, Roman. I care about this, us. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, his expression had shifted to the cold, calculating mask she recognized from his business dealings. Then we end this, tonight. Salvatore wants a war? I'll give him one. But when it's over, when you and David are safe, he cupped her face. Will you stay with me, even knowing what I am? Yes, she said without hesitation, but only if you promise me one thing. Anything. That you'll let the boy I saved that night exist alongside the man you've become. That you won't let darkness consume all of you. Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. I don't know if I can promise that. Try. For me. For you, he agreed. I'll try. The next 6 hours were a blur of preparation. Roman's men transformed his penthouse into a fortress. David arrived, frightened but trying to be brave, and Roman assigned his 2 best guards to protect the boy. Nothing happens to him, Roman told them in Italian, his voice deadly serious. Or you answer to me. Then he turned to Lyric, pulled her into his office and closed the door. I need you to understand something, he said, his hands on her shoulders. What's about to happen tonight, the violence, the darkness, that's the real me. The monster everyone fears. If you see it and change your mind about us, I'll understand. I won't change my mind. You say that now. Roman. She placed her hand over his heart. I saw you at your most vulnerable 15 years ago, dying in a fire. And I see you now trying to protect everyone you care about. I see all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. He pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise and a goodbye all at once. At midnight, Salvatore's men came. Lyric watched from the panic room Roman had insisted she and David wait in, the monitors showing the penthouse's multiple angles. She saw the elevator doors open, saw armed men pour out, saw Roman standing in the center of his office, surrounded by his own soldiers, looking every inch the dangerous crime lord he was. The fight was brutal and efficient. Roman moved like violence personified, every shot precise, every movement calculated. She saw him take down 3 men with his bare hands, his face emotionless, cold. This was the monster he'd warned her about, the killer, the crime boss. And she didn't flinch, because she also saw him position himself between his enemies and the panic room door, saw him take a bullet to the shoulder to protect his men, saw the way he fought like someone who had everything to lose. When it was over, 15 of Salvatore's men were on the ground, disarmed or unconscious. And Salvatore himself stood in the center of the room, Roman's gun pressed to his temple. You touched what's mine, Roman said, his voice devoid of emotion. That's a death sentence. Your little maid? Salvatore laughed, even with a gun to his head. You're going soft, De Luca. Falling for a Roman pistol whipped him, cutting off the slur. Watch your mouth. That woman saved my life twice, once 15 years ago, and again when she decided to stay in my world despite everything. She's braver than you'll ever be. So kill me then, but my family will come for her, for your little pet. She'll never be safe. Lyric saw Roman's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the cold calculation in his eyes. He was going to do it. He was going to kill Salvatore right there. And then she remembered her promise. Don't let darkness consume all of you. She made a decision that could cost her everything. She opened the panic room door. Lyric, no! Roman's head snapped toward her, his expression furious and terrified. But she walked forward anyway, stepping over debris and blood, until she stood beside Roman. Don't kill him, she said quietly. He tried to hurt you, to hurt David. I know, but killing him makes you exactly what he thinks you are. And I know you're more than that. You don't understand this world, then explain it to me. But don't do this. Not like this. Not when there's another way. Roman stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Around them, his men looked equally shocked. In their world, mercy was weakness. But Lyric wasn't talking about mercy. You want to hurt him? She said. Take everything. His territory, his money, his power. Leave him with nothing but his life so he can watch everything he built crumble. That's a worse punishment than death. Salvatore's eyes widened with fear, real fear, for the first time. And slowly, Roman lowered the gun. You heard her, he said to his men. By dawn, everything Salvatore owns belongs to us. His businesses, his accounts, his properties, all of it. Then he turned to Salvatore. You're going to disappear. Leave New York. Leave the East Coast. If I ever see you again, if you ever even think about coming near what's mine, I won't be so merciful. Capisci? Salvatore nodded, defeated, and Roman's men dragged him away. When they were alone, Roman turned to her, blood on his shirt, exhaustion in his eyes. You just changed the rules of this entire game. Good. Maybe it's time for new rules. He laughed, the sound incredulous and amazed, and pulled her into his arms, wincing slightly from his injured shoulder. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the craziest. Can't I be both? Definitely both. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips. I love you. I don't know when it happened, but it did. I love you, Lyric Bennett. The woman who saved me twice, the woman who makes me want to be better than what I am. Tears streamed down her face. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and overprotective, and you live in a world I don't understand. I'll teach you everything. No more secrets between us. No more secrets, she agreed. Behind them, David's voice came from the panic room doorway. So does this mean I should call him my future brother-in-law or what? They both turned to find her little brother smirking, despite the fear in his eyes. Roman looked at Lyric, then at David, and smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. That depends. Would you be okay with that? David shrugged, trying to look nonchalant. I mean, the guy did pay for my medical bills and get us a nice apartment. Plus he looks at you like you hung the moon. Could do worse. Lyric laughed through her tears and looked at Roman. I think that's a yes. Good. Roman pulled a small box from his pocket, a box Lyric realized he must have been carrying all night, and dropped to one knee right there, surrounded by the aftermath of battle. I had a whole plan. Candlelight, roses, some romantic speech. But standing here, in the ruins of war, with you looking at me like I'm worth saving, that feels more honest. He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Lyric Bennett, will you marry me? Will you stand beside me in this violent, complicated world and help me find the light in it? She should have been shocked, should have asked for time to think, should have been reasonable. Instead, she said, yes, yes, absolutely, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, stood, and kissed her so deeply that David made a gagging sound in the background. When they finally broke apart, Roman whispered against her lips, 15 years ago you saved my life in that fire. Tonight you saved my soul. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret choosing you, she whispered back, because you chose me too, the invisible girl from Queens, the nobody. Never nobody, he corrected fiercely. Never invisible. Not to me. Not ever again. And as dawn broke over New York City, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Lyric stood in Roman DeLuca's arms and felt, for the first time in her life, like she was exactly where she belonged. 3 years later, Lyric stood in the library of their home, not the penthouse but a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, and watched through the window as Roman taught David how to throw a punch properly. Her brother was 18 now, healthy and strong, the medication finally working. He was starting college in the fall, studying criminal justice with dreams of becoming a prosecutor. Roman had laughed when David announced his career choice, but supported him completely. He wants to put away people like me, Roman had said. Kids got integrity. I respect that. The wedding had been small and private, just David, a few of Roman's most trusted men, and a priest who didn't ask questions. She'd worn a simple white dress and carried wildflowers, and Roman had cried when he saw her walking toward him. He'd been true to his promise. He still ran his empire, still made hard decisions, but he'd pulled back from the most violent aspects of his business. I'm building something cleaner, he'd told her, for our future, for our children. Children. Lyric placed a hand on her stomach, where their daughter was growing. They'd found out yesterday, and Roman had looked at her with such wonder and terror that she'd laughed and cried at the same time. I'm going to be a father, he'd whispered, his hand covering hers on her belly. Me, a man who's done terrible things. You're going to be a wonderful father, she'd corrected, because you know what it's like to be saved, and you'll make sure our daughter never feels invisible. Now watching him with David, seeing the gentleness in his movements despite his fierce appearance, she knew she'd been right. The doorbell rang, and Lyric went to answer it, smiling when she saw who it was. Marco, one of Roman's men, holding flowers. For you, Mrs. DeLuca, he said with a grin. Boss's orders. He says to remind you he loves you, even though he told you 3 times already this morning. She took the flowers, laughing. Tell him I love him too, and that he's ridiculous. Already know I'm ridiculous, Tesoro. Roman's voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. But you married me anyway. Biggest mistake of my life, she teased. Liar. He turned her in his arms, his expression softening. Thank you. For what? For seeing that scared kid in the warehouse 15 years ago and deciding he was worth saving. For finding me again when the universe gave us a second chance. For loving me despite everything I am and everything I've done. His hand drifted to her stomach. For giving me a family, a reason to be better. You don't have to thank me for any of that. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Even when I'm overprotective and stubborn. Especially then. She kissed him softly. Because it means you care. And caring, Roman DeLuca, is your superpower. He smiled against her lips. You're my superpower. Behind them, David made another gagging sound. You two are disgusting. I'm going to hang out with Marco. At least he doesn't make heart eyes every 5 seconds. But he was smiling as he said it. Happy and healthy and safe. As Roman closed the door and pulled Lyric back into his arms, dancing with her to music only they could hear, she thought about that night 15 years ago, about the smoke and flames and the lightning-shaped scar she'd touched in the darkness. She'd saved a boy that night without knowing who he would become, and years later, he'd saved her right back, not from fire but from invisibility, from a life of just surviving instead of truly living. What are you thinking about? Roman murmured, his lips brushing her temple. That lightning struck twice, she said softly. Once in that warehouse, and once when I walked into your office. You believe in fate. I believe in us. Isn't that the same thing? Roman considered this, then smiled, that rare, genuine smile he reserved only for her. Yeah, Tesoro. I think maybe it is. And as they swayed together in their home, David's laughter drifting in from outside, the future growing inside her, Lyric knew with absolute certainty that every moment of fear, every obstacle, every impossible odd had been worth it, because lightning doesn't strike twice, unless it's meant to, unless it's destiny, unless it's love. This story has come to an end. If it touched your heart in any way, leave your like and share it with someone who also enjoys emotional stories. New stories are coming soon. Until next time.